The crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the ballroom floor like scattered diamonds on black ice. On March 16, 1792, King Gustav III of Sweden adjusted his mask and swept into his last masquerade ball, unaware that death lurked behind another mask in that glittering crowd. What drives men to murder their king? Perhaps it begins not with the blade or bullet, but with the slow poison of power gone sour. Through the gilded halls of Stockholm's Royal Opera House, the elite of Swedish society twirled and schemed, their feet tracing patterns as intricate as the conspiracies that brought them there. But beneath the powder and perfume, beneath the silk and silver lace, a darker dance was unfolding. For in the shadows of Sweden's enlightened monarchy, a group of nobles had decided their king must die. Have you ever wondered what thoughts pass through a monarch's mind in those last precious moments before assassination? Does some ancient instinct whisper warnings through the blood? Some primal sense that predators are near? Gustav III had fashioned himself the theatre king, a dramatic soul who transformed Sweden into a stage for his grand ambitions. Like his cousin Louis XVIII of France, he believed in absolute monarchy, but with an artiste's flair. Yet behind this cultured facade lay a man who had stripped Sweden's nobility of their power through a bloodless coup, who had launched an ill-fated war against Russia that drained the treasury and cost thousands of lives. The conspiracy against him grew like frost on a window pane, crystallizing from 1,000 small grievances into deadly intent. Count Jacob Johann Ankerström, once a captain in the King's Own Guards, nursed a particular hatred. He would be the hand that held the pistol, but behind him stood a shadow cabinet of nobles. Count Claes Frederick Horn, Count Adolf Ludwig Ribbing, and others who saw in Gustav not a patron of the arts, but a tyrant in theatre paint. Through the candlelit halls of Stockholm, they whispered their plans like a dark liturgy. They loaded pistols with rusty nails and broken shot, ensuring that any wound would fester. They drew lots to decide who would pull the trigger. And they waited for the perfect moment, a public spectacle where masks would hide both murderer and victim. The night air was knife-sharp when Gustav arrived at the opera house, wrapped in a light-colored domino cloak that made him easy to spot despite his mask. Had he chosen his costume with his usual theatrical flair, or was fate playing costume mistress that evening? The conspirators circled him like wolves around a wounded stag, waiting for their moment. Picture the scene. Hundreds of masked revelers spinning through the candlelight, the air heavy with powder and perfume and fear. The music swells, a minuet perhaps, or one of the new German waltzes. And then, through the press of bodies, Ankerström approaches. The pistol is heavy in his pocket, loaded with those rusty nails that will carry tetanus into the king's flesh. "Bonjour, beau masque," someone calls out, the traditional greeting of the masquerade. And then the shot rings out, echoing off the gilt and marble like thunder in a cathedral. Gustav staggers but does not fall. "Ah, je suis blessé," he cries in French, the language of his court. "I am wounded." The ball of rusty shot has torn into his lower back, but the king remains standing. Is this not the ultimate performance? The monarch mortally wounded yet maintaining his dignity, like a character from one of his own operas? The ballroom erupts into chaos. Masks are torn off, screams replace the music, and the conspirators melt away into the night. Guards rush to their king, who waves away assistance and insists on walking to his apartments. Even now, even with death's poison seeping through his veins, Gustav plays his role to perfection. For 13 days, the king lingered in his chambers while Stockholm held its breath. The wound festered as planned, tetanus set in, and still, Gustav conducted himself like a monarch on stage. He received visitors, arranged affairs of state, and even pardoned those involved in the conspiracy, all except Ankerström, who was captured and confessed. Outside the palace, Sweden teetered on the edge of revolution. The winds of change that had already engulfed France were howling at the gates of Stockholm. The nobility, despite their role in the assassination, feared what might come next. In his final hours, as infection and tetanus twisted his body with pain, did Gustav reflect on the role he had played in his own destruction? Did he see himself as the tragic hero he had always longed to be? Or did the masks finally fall away to reveal the man beneath? On March 29, 1792, the curtain fell on Gustav III's final performance. The theatre king took his last bow and left the stage of history. His assassin met a fate designed to match the theatrical nature of his crime. Ankarström was paraded through Stockholm for 3 days, flogged at each corner, and then executed by beheading. Even in death, even in punishment, the dramatic flair that characterized Gustav's reign persisted. The murder of Gustav III marked more than the end of a king's life. It signaled the beginning of the end for absolute monarchy in Sweden. Like a Greek tragedy, the very forces Gustav had sought to control ultimately brought about his destruction. His 13-year-old son, Gustav IV Adolf, ascended to the throne under a regency, but the power of the monarchy had been mortally wounded alongside its master. Today, the Royal Opera House still stands in Stockholm, its chandeliers still sparkling like tears frozen in mid-fall. In its halls, tourists snap photos where once assassins plotted and kings danced their last. The spot where Gustav fell is marked with a small plaque, a humble epilogue for a man who lived his life as if it were a grand opera. In the end, perhaps Gustav achieved exactly what he had always wanted: immortality. Not as a king, but as a character in a story that would be told and retold through the centuries. His death scene, played out over those 13 excruciating days, became the stuff of legend. His murder, the inspiration for works of art and literature, including Verdi's opera Un ballo in maschera. The theatre king had become theatre itself. As the curtain falls on this tale of regicide and revolution, of art and ambition, of masks, both literal and metaphorical, we are left to wonder, in the grand performance of power, who is the actor and who is the audience? When does governance become merely theatre, and at what point does the audience decide to storm the stage? In the masquerade of politics, are we not all wearing masks, playing parts in a drama we only partially understand? The chandeliers still sparkle in Stockholm's Royal Opera House, the masks still hang in museums. And somewhere in the shadows of history, a king still adjusts his domino cloak and steps out onto the ballroom floor, his mind filled with hope in that moment, just before the shot rings out, before the music stops, before the final curtain falls.